propaganda. Who live for propaganda. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. Propaganda, news media. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. Oh gosh. Original man, he was black, he was black, he was an African. Carbon, you are. Science will show that and prove that over and over again. Just see on the home. We tell them honor your fathers that your days may be long. Original black man. We were here from foundation of time. We will remain until the end. Just see on the home. Don't listen to propaganda. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. Propaganda, news media. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. You. Black is absorption of all light and color. So hear me, little sister. In the earth and in the sky are the cycles of your womb. See yourself precious once again. We are earth for the earth of the daughters of our people. She and her tears could find no comfort. Our arms are again strong. We will be there for our daughters. We will be there. Just see no home. Don't listen to your propaganda. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. Propaganda, news media. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. Oh gosh. Black is the color of our solar system. Out of blackness was born the light. Black is the color of the whole universe. Your morning starts with darkness. Did not your morning start with darkness? Did not your morning start with darkness? Did not this morning start with darkness? Hey, well, so does tonight. Alpha, Alpha and Omega I, the beginning and the end. Don't listen to propaganda. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. All aboard. I'm not leaving without my contributions accounted for. All aboard. I'm not leaving your vineyard without the groundwork accounted for. Hey, hey, man, we learn to humble to his day. Many live and die unnecessarily. Hey, man, we learn to pray with long suffering. Many live and die still pretending. You are every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. Rastafari, Selassie I live. Every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. Rastafari, Selassie I live. Go down, Ethiopia. Come, out of Afrakan Emperor, come. Go down, Ethiopia. The ancient ancestors call from our bloodlines. They remember word, sound, and power will over words.
Tendai Mwali, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai, Mudzimu, Mukuru, we give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation for all African people. Greetings and welcome, brothers and sisters, and thank you for being here for another session of Kimbunga Media live and in session with myself, Shakara. Yes, indeed, in the building. Looking forward to having a very, very important conversation with an extremely important mama in our Pan-African global community, brothers and sisters. So do stay tuned, do stay tuned. We'll be bringing her through shortly. Just want to make sure that you hit the like button as you come through. Hit the like button as you come through. Yes, indeed, brothers and sisters, you know what I mean? And then you have to share the like. Share the button, sorry. Hit the share button and share this video far and wide and make the people them know say ChenziRa is live and in session with Mama ChenziRa Kahina this evening, brothers and sisters. Trust me, you don't want to miss that something here. You don't want to miss the conversation, yeah. It is a must that you tune in and feast on the wellspring of the wisdom, the knowledge, and the understanding that our mama will be sharing with us this evening. And so I certainly am looking forward to it. And I am certainly looking forward to sharing our mama with you all this evening, brothers and sisters. It's going to be important, enlightening, and purposeful, no doubt. All right, brothers and sisters, do you want to let you know to remind you to tune in tomorrow, because at 8 p.m. GMT, 3 p.m. EST, we will be speaking to Brother Vava Tampa and Brother Uncle Loezi Kinshasa, both hailing from the nation known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, brothers and sisters. And we're going to be engaging further in our conversations about the current situation in the Congo with our We Stand with Congo series. If you've been with us for a while, you know that we've been standing with Haiti consistently, and we're still standing with Haiti. We've got more Haiti shows coming, brothers and sisters. Or you also have to stand with our brothers and sisters in the Congo in relation to what is taking place in the Congo. Currently, we will be hosting a conversation this week and next week on the Congo, brothers and sisters. It is extremely important that we recognize as African people what is taking place in the Congo, not because, but partly because. Yeah, in other words, what I mean is, this is not the reason why we should be interested, but it adds to the reasons why we should be interested. The fact that the mainstream mass media tends to be silent on the issue of the Congo. And it's not really their job. If we understand the role of the mainstream mass media, their job is to support the global system of white supremacy. And so there are certain things that they're not going to focus on too tough because it exposes them significantly. But it is our job as Pan-African media, as universal African nationalist media in this dispensation of time, to give voice to our people around the world, especially when our people and where our people are existing in a state of crisis. And so we are hoping that our shows here at Kimbunga Media will be a small contribution to shining a light on what is taking place in the Congo, and hopefully, most importantly, that light resulting in the improved and increased desire among African people and willingness among African people to engage in meaningful organization to solve the problems that we need to solve, brothers and sisters. I hope ones and ones tuning tomorrow, as I'm sure you will. And right now, however, we're going to focus on a region of the Caribbean that often goes unmentioned, unnoticed, and unsung, brothers and sisters. And that is the U.S. Virgin Islands. And you will note the prefix U.S. Virgin Islands, brothers and sisters. We're going to get into a little of that history and why it is known as the U.S. Virgin Islands. And we're going to also touch on a couple other issues as it pertains to Africans in the Caribbean. Our special guest is one of the leading lights, the leading voices of Pan-African activism and African-centered cultural retention in the Caribbean, brothers and sisters. Yes, indeed. She serves as the second Assistant President General for the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, RC 2020. She is the co-founder of Per Ankh, the House of life. She is the CEO of AST Speaks consultancy, brothers and sisters. She is a university professor, and as I love to refer to her, as our physical manifestation in this dispensation of time of our great mama, Mama Henrietta Vinton Davis. Yes, indeed, brothers and sisters, I am pleased to bring to you our doctor, sister, Mama ChenziRa Kahina. Greetings, Mama ChenziRa.
Greetings, Brother Shakara. Giving thanks, much more, Hotep, for having the opportunity and the willingness to share in this conversation because there's some things that, as you said, will come across very loving, very
Mm-hmm.
balanced, very joyous. And there's
Yes,
some things that will come with pure fire and
absolutely,
force.
absolutely.
And some people may refer to it as being somewhat confrontational, but we're going to bring truth to
Mm-hmm,
power
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
we're
mm-hmm.
restoring Ma'at in all ways
Absolutely.
that we are able to. So, giving thanks for the opportunity to share.
Yes, Mama. Yes, Mama. So some of us are, I have the pleasure of knowing you and your work and all the beautiful things that you do. For those who don't, let's, from your own words, beyond my little Chenzida Kaina.
Mama ChenziRa Kahina is a daughter of the
Mm-hmm,
global African civilization. I'll start
mm-hmm,
there.
mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm,
while my roots are grounded between the Caribbean, I'm being educated in parts of my iterations in the 48 contiguous. My home grounds for almost 40 years has been here in what is more correctly known as the Virgin Islands of the United States. And I
mm-hmm,
want to make sure I take a moment and pause there because persons behind tourism and behind intentions to keep the colonial frame of reference to these spaces like to put the US first when in
mm-hmm,
actuality the legal name when these lands were purchased from the Kingdom of Denmark by
mm,
the United States government in 1916 formally, in 1917 ceremoniously. The
mm-hmm,
legal name is the Virgin Islands of the United States. Hence, it would be VI us.
mm-hmm,
Got that?
mm-hmm.
So it's a
Yes,
lot
ma'am.
of times, yes, a lot of times when we're speaking, and again, you'll see this in United Nations documentation, in various national references. They're very comfortable putting the US first, not
Mm,
recognizing that the most expensive real estate in the history of the United States that was ever purchased are these Virgin Islands of the United States. Not in
mm,
fiat money, but in $25 million in gold in
mm,
1916. And here we are, 2025, and we're still navigating through yet a sixth iteration of a Constitution Convention. We're still having challenges on our federal status because for some people, some persons don't want to address that.
mm,
So we sit in a quandary of being a non incorporated, non self governing territory of the United States, short
mm,
version, a colony.
mm.
Just to give some
Interesting.
context, just to give some context. And I know I could sit here and talk about, yes, I'm a grandmother, as a mother, I'm a naturopathic
Yes.
therapist, I'm a priestess. I could speak, yes, I teach in various iterations here at the university in the Virgin
Mm-hmm.
Islands, as well as providing my skills, talents, and expertise to a wider range. I sit
Yeah.
as an executive council member of the Caribbean Pan-African Network. You've already mentioned my role as the
Mm-hmm.
second assistant president general, as well as the High Commissioner General for
Mm-hmm.
Caribbean Americas within the UNIA-ACL RC 2020. But that facilitates my ability to sit and engage and work and contribute to the CARICOM Reparations Commission and a host of other entities, right, in this
Yeah.
region in particular. And it has facilitated my ability to also expand because on the other line of that more naturopathic therapeutic piece, I do a lot
Mm-hmm.
of healing work. I serve as a midwife. I have birthed youth, particularly in spaces where where their families do not have access to
Right.
after maternal pre and post care. Yeah. So
Yes. Yeah.
a lot, and that's just some of what, as an African Queen Mother Warrior, and I need to highlight that, is through the lens of yet another movement, the African Queen Mother Warriors, that I'm able to do this particular work as well.
Okay, okay. And with the African Queen Mother Warriors, you're engaged with two mamas who are well known to us in Africa, UK,
Absolutely.
namely
Absolutely.
Sister Esther. Yeah,
Sis Doctor, and the
yeah,
illustrious African Queen Mother Warrior, Esther
yes,
Hokusai. Yes,
yes, yes,
powerful,
yes. You know what
powerful
I mean?
queen. Along with African Queen Mother Warrior, Isis Samlak. Along, I mean,
Absolutely,
there's like a list that
absolutely,
y'all don't get to keep them and claim them of us. We claim them all over. We claim them all over. Right. The
absolutely, Mama.
global women, global African Queen Mother Warriors.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're more than pleased and glad to lend them to you. You know,
Give thanks. Give thanks.
just send them back when periodically. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, on their wish, on their wish. Yes,
Indeed, indeed.
yes.
Yes, Mama. All right. Oh, and definitely we have to get you back on to discuss your work with the Bambula
Mhm,
tradition.
mhm,
You know what I'm saying? And some of your priestess work. We would love to talk to you about that at some point at a later date. But today we really want to get into this focus on the Virgin Islands and
okay.
what is the Virgin Islands. So you kind of given a rundown already, yeah. But
Mm,
prior to that point, because people often, as I said, like miss out the Virgin Islands in the roll call, yeah.
oh, for
When
sure.
they are carnival and we are wear flag, and everybody say Trinidad, Jamaica, Dominica, Saint Lucia, Grenada. People don't say the Virgin Islands. We're not in a Saint Croix, yeah. We're not in a Saint Thomas, you know. You know what I mean? You know.
Right,
And
right.
but the Virgin Islands has a very strong carnival tradition, yeah.
Absolutely.
That is, well renowned in many respects, right? So,
Yes.
let's look at the Virgin Islands. That's prior to that 1916 period. Is it one of the islands that was well known for having Africans enslaved? Is it? Sorry, I say one of the islands. One of the group of islands, because the Virgin Islands is a group of islands. What they call an archipelago. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Go ahead.
over
Bring up
50.
that
Yeah,
geography class. Bring up that geography class.
that's right. You know what I mean? Yeah, but it's over 50 islands, correct? And
Well, see, on the British Virgin Island side, it's many more. They refer
right,
to them, thousands of Virgin Islands on that side. So
yes,
there's a lot of small keys, and
yes,
on that side they have more than we
hmm
do. On
yes,
the Virgin Islands U.S. side, it is
hmm
primarily
yes,
St. Croix,
yes,
84 square miles, St.
mhm,
Thomas, 32 square miles, St.
mhm,
John, 20 square miles, and
right,
Water Island, which is approximately 2 square miles. And then there's small keys like Buck
keys,
Island
right,
on both sides and the
okay,
Sapelo Islands, little keys that that are not habited in terms of,
yeah,
how, residential properties, etc. You have
okay,
Hassel Island, and several of these properties are have been under the guise of national parks, right? So, for
okay,
example, in St. John, while it's only 20 square miles, more than, and I'd like to put it in acres so persons can just kind of see,
hmm
12,000 acres,
hmm
9,500 plus or minus
hmm
are under the leasehold and direction of the Virgin Islands National Park Service, which sits inside of the National Park Service, which is part of the Department of the Interior's purview. So just keep that in mind, that many of our own African people that
mm,
have roots, multi-generational roots in St. John, it
hmm
it is shifted from being predominantly African populated to now, like many people think, it's now 60-40, with Eurasians
mm,
being the larger population, just because of who can afford to live there,
to
and
live there, yeah,
yeah, and just because of the limitations on the property. And not to say that there aren't wonderful, engaging preservation, historic, cultural activities that happen through certain efforts of the National Park Service, but again, the land should be available to those that have those indigenous ancestral native roots there. And
right,
that's been a tug of war probably for more than 50 years, just because, and even when their lease agreement expired, no one knew. I mean, there were some of us that knew. And if we brought it to the public's attention, it became, well,
mm,
we're just going to renew it shortly. And that renewal,
mm,
in some instances, has continued beyond the 2018 was
mm.
when it should have been a revert of that land to the people of the Virgin Islands into perpetuity. And that was
Okay.
not done for obvious
Okay.
reasons. It's beautiful,
Okay.
beautiful land, beautiful land.
All right. So coming back to my question, then, in terms of the enslavement period, to
Yeah.
what extent did Africans populate the what is now considered to be the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Okay.
What's the history there?
Okay. So many of the history is most in terms of the Danish role, then it would
Hmm.
come to about the 1730s. But
Hmm.
in 1733, that's the year, those a few years earlier, a few years after, that
Hmm.
what is now known as the Virgin Islands of the United States, or I'll just say VI us,
Hmm.
the was known as the Danish West Indies under the
Yes.
rulership of the kingdom. And persons need to be clear, there was the crown component, there was a
Hmm.
royal component, there was the actual Danish West Indian Corporation, which operated like a government, and then it
Yes.
was the actual kingdom. And
Yes.
from 1733 until 1916, and like I said, ceremoniously till 1917, the Danish West Indies were governed. And yes, there was enslavement here, keeping in mind that the Danish government, and if we
Hmm.
remember what exists in West Africa, specifically on the Gold Coast,
Hmm.
specifically in Ghana, what
Hmm.
was happening in Ghana was
Hmm.
parallel to what was happening here in what is now the VI us during
Right.
its Danish West Indian period. There's a lot, and this is a pretty extensive history. So, persons, many Eurasian scholars chose to document and gave a particular face with
Hmm.
a very intentional erasure of the narrative from the perspective of African, indigenous, and free people. Not
Hmm.
everyone that came to these shores, that worked in these shores, came from the enslavement experience, because many
Right.
of our free Africans were able to come and provide their skills, talents, and expertise, whether as educators, as scientists, as blacksmiths or metalsmiths more correctly, as artisans, as craftspersons, as architects, as seafaring persons and merchants, and all of these other skills, yeah? And
Hmm.
particularly in the pre-1730s, it was governed by the French. So the thing about the Danish West Indies, because of its geographical location, literally center between the south of the 48 contiguous US and the north of South America, and again, sitting in a very central location, militaristically strategic. I want to
Right.
highlight so that was the other reason why the Danes clung on as long as they could, and they
Mm.
were the last, one of the last European powers to
Hmm.
actually get involved in the. So that's why they tend to refer to them peculiar term as the benevolent colonizer or the
Mm.
benevolent slave. But their involvement was so last minute because they were like, let's say, like 1730s. And of course, in less than 70 years, there was a lot of changes. There were so many insurrections because they had insurrections in the Danish West Indies like all the
Mm.
time. But 1733, they came forward. 1759, there was a
Mm.
significant revolution, and mind you, by William Davis, an African William Davis, and that
Right.
in that uprising, they killed all of the Africans, just so persons can get, or at least they tried to, that they felt
Mm.
were involved in that. And people don't talk about that one because
Mm.
it just makes Danish people not look as
Mhm.
benevolent as they to be seen. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then from 1759 coming into the early 1800s, that was a time where they were forced to
Hmm.
begin the process of abolishing at least the slave trade. And keep in
Mm.
mind that these things were going on from the 1400s. So
Absolutely.
by the time they got into it, they were like on the literally the last vestiges, and they just did everything extreme. They had codes that
Mm.
were coming from the French influence, what is regarded as the Gardelin Code. And in that Gardelin Code, there were these very extreme forms of torture for enslaved Africans. So
Mm. Mm.
when we look at the historiography of what took place from, let's say, the late 1600s coming into the early 1700s, and the
Mhm.
fight between the Danish, various entities, right? The French, the Spanish, the
Mm,
British. This goes on. The Knights of Malta. There were like, persons referred to St. Croix as a land of seven flags. And they
mm,
forget that the flag they need to remember, because the other thing that happened in 1733 that was very interesting. Again, keep in mind that was like the onset of the shift from the French West Indies, as these
mm-hmm,
islands were referred to, becoming the Danish West Indies. And that transition, they brought in a very large wave of African royals from West Africa, so they thought. And many of
mm-hmm.
them actually came from Central Africa, from royal kingdoms that were militaristically trained. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And one of the most significant uprisings that happened on the Isle of St. John, the smallest short of
Mm-hmm,
water island in the former Danish West Indies, was led by a queen, Queen Brefu. And many refer to her as being part of the Amina ethnic group, among, close to the Akan. When
mm,
we've done the research, we have learned that she actually was captured from the interior, coming from a
mm,
space that we would then now look towards as those ascendants within Ndongo, or in areas that are now known like Angola,
mm-hmm,
Southern Congo, the same
mm-hmm,
Congo we're speaking of, yeah? And
mm-hmm.
Queen Brefu, alongside King Kanta and Prince Claes, they were all royals. They
Right.
organized a revolution on November 23rd, 1733. And that revolution killed off all except one European that came in that area in St. John.
Mm,
And they
mm,
sent a message, leave these Africans to their own liberation. Mind you,
mm,
people just think of the 1730s, okay? Just so we don't
mm,
think that this is like new, what we're doing
mm,
in the 21st century, yeah? And
mm,
that with that activity, they were able to keep the Isle of St. John as an independent African space.
right.
May 24th, 1734, when not only the Spanish, not only the French, not only the British, not only the
Mm,
free Negro entities, the turncoat, whatever you want to call them, traitor, whatever, whatever, right,
mm,
came and were able to subdue some. Some choose
right.
to take their life, some choose to leave the island and
Right.
take their chances in the water and go to other islands that we now
Absolutely.
know started revolutions in other islands, right? But these were
Absolutely.
Africans that always engaged in their freeness, their
Yes.
liberation from even as early as 1730s. And as we speak, I can go to specific other significant elements of that
Mm,
are linked to what transpired in the Virgin Islands, why
right.
it's called the Virgin Islands of the U.S., or to some the U.S. Virgin Islands, and also the connection that it has to the importance and the essentials linked to reparatory justice and reparations.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to come to that. Let me just stick here for a moment, though. And when we're talking about the Americas in general, and this in this instance, the Caribbean in specific, we always have to remember that we're discussing stolen land or
Mm.
capture land, as we might refer to it. And so, I just want to ask you about indigenous Taíno people, the extent to which they still exist within the Virgin Islands, or what stories can you tell us about the original Taino people
So
of
I'm
what is the Virgin Islands?
it's interesting that you say, because the Taino are the more recent, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
there is a ongoing, we have caciques that are here in the 21st century.
Mhm,
We have caciques like Arieto
mhm,
Permiso, and who is an elders who has walked this trod of the preservation of
mm,
the indigenous cultures here. And they
mhm,
recognize that those indigenous cultures had contact, blending, cross pollination, if you would like to look at that, with the Africans that they too met here, because there were
mhm,
Africans that were in these spaces for
mhm,
millennia upon
mhm,
millennia. You also, I'm speaking in this iteration for St. Croix,
mhm,
also in St. Thomas, and spreading on into St. John, and also
mhm.
other parts of the Virgin Islands unified in what's
Okay.
now British Virgin Islands. You have persons that recognize the indigeneity of the ancestry of these lands, and
Right.
some linked to the Kalina, some linked to the Kalinago, some linked
Mhm,
to the Neri, which were before them, And going
Mm-hmm.
even further to Siboney, you have some that are connected to Quisqueya in our
Mm-hmm.
neighboring Isle of República Dominicana, Dominican Republic,
Public.
and
Mm-hmm.
Haiti, right? Because those persons were Quisqueya, and
Mm-hmm.
they had their own language, they had their own cultural nuance and traditions, and so. But there was a blending in these regions that we speak of the Virgin Islands in particular. So there's
Okay.
always when we speak of our indigeneity in these spaces, we always include and have that respect for the indigenous that in contemporary times are referred to as Taino or
Mm-hmm.
Taina, as well
Mm-hmm.
as Kalina or Kalinago that came from the
Mm-hmm.
south up into these regions. And we know that we have to keep those names. There's an organization, let me rephrase, they're actually moving in that realm of nationhood. I mean, it's a not for profit organization, yes, but they have
Mm-hmm.
done their mitochondrial DNA research and ancestry engagements, and that's Opia Taino International. The
Okay.
family is a, and I have to take a pause when I say that. While born in what is now the Isle of St. Thomas, Virgin
Mm-hmm.
Islands, they
Mm-hmm.
have done that historiography exceptionally well. Kasike Makiafan Phillips is also, along with her family, and I want to highlight husband and
Right.
been married for a long time,
Right.
12 children, and close to 30 grandchildren
Oi.
that maintain that affinity, that respect, and that drive to their indigeneity. In the
Mm-hmm.
case of her husband, as Kalinago, and in the
Mm-hmm.
case of Cacique Makiafan, as Taino. And so I think it's important for persons that are interested in that, then I would encourage them to learn more
Right.
about Taino because they do those kinds of exhibitions and that
Right.
research show who was here before any age of discovery,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
before any colonization of the Eurasian form, and definitely far, far, far before the African enslavement and the Maangamizing that happened in
Right.
these former Danish
Absolutely.
West Indies.
Give thanks for that, mama. That's important history there, you know. So so in relation now, so we understand that the Danish people were the first to kind of, settle the island as far as enslavement is concerned, as far as the Maafra is concerned, and then eventually they sold the land and presumably all the people on it to the US. Yeah. So what were the circumstances under which that took place?
So for that part, and I again because we do have a limited amount of time, but I still
Yeah.
would like to respectfully. I want to share what
Yes.
transpired because it wasn't just that the Danish wanted to sell the lands.
Mm, mm,
It
mm.
started from mid 1800s, as the enslavement trade was becoming less profitable. There
Right.
were, remember again in the British Isles in the 1830s, was the 1834, there was the quote emancipation, and the Danish West Indies was hesitant to do that in the 1830s. It took them till 1848 to actually
Mm,
do some form of emancipation. And
okay.
persons need to recognize that these changes had a it created more uprisings. There was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of instability economically that affected not only the colonizers but also their supporters as well as
Mm,
the Africans. You don't just take
mm,
people, have them enslaved for nearly over 200 years, and then just say you free,
mm,
leave. No, we're
mm,
not going to pay for your housing. We're not going to pay
mm,
for your food, even though you were
mm,
feeding us and growing
mm,
food for us.
mm,
We're not going to have, you're not going to have any kind of ability to care for yourselves or your family. And that
mm.
created a lot of instability. So let's say from the 1830s, coming into the 1840s, by the 1860s, the conditions of labor were very horrific. And this was
Yeah.
all complemented by what we then they used to call gales that we now know as hurricanes. So when the gales came, it mashed up everything for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that stress, that economic dismantling of what they were accustomed to, created yet another set of conditions, labor conditions. So there was a lot of activities for labor rights and labor uprisings. So in 1878, in the Isle of St. Croix, persons refer to St. Croix as the Fireburn Island, right? So there was, again, women and men, but it's the
Mhm.
women who gathered. And there were several women. You know, we could speak of Queen Mary Thomas. We
Mhm.
could speak of Queen Susanna Solomon, you know,
Mhm.
Queen Matilda McBean, Queen Felicita. I'm just going by the ones that I always remember, right? Some
Mhm.
people say three queens. It wasn't just three. It was a
Mm.
bunch of them, right?
Mm.
These are the ones
Mm.
that we remember because those particular four were
Mhm.
those that were sent because of them rising up on October 1st,
Okay.
1888, and starting a fire burn. They said, since you don't want to listen to what we're telling you, that we
Mhm.
need to have proper wages and you need to make sure that the conditions here are fair for everybody. You can't come here and live wealthy and free on our back and sweat because slavery done. They burned
Mhm.
everything.
Mm.
Like they burned from north. You don't really see the island, so I want to make sure I give it some depth. A good portion of the north, central, and south, going towards the east of the island, all 84 square miles, was touched by this fire burn,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
these women and men organized to make their concerns known, and they knew that if you get mass in a pocket, then thing gonna shift, right? And with that, not only did some of the brothers and sisters that were involved in that uprising, in that what we refer to as a revolution,
Mhm.
not only were they executed, you know, that technique of putting people on the stake and burning them, that happened
Mm.
right in Estate Grove, right? They haven't
Mm.
atoned for that yet, and that's the kind of reparatory justice that we speak to. That if
Absolutely.
you don't just erase that you took women primarily and some men. The men they
Mhm.
just shot and buried, but the
Mm.
women they wanted the women to see these women on stake and burned. Do you understand me?
Mm.
Right by
Mhm.
bob trees that we still give sacred rituals and rites and honorary
Absolutely.
engagements to, right? Then you have an area on the front, which is a beautiful waterfront now. It's
Mhm.
very serene and beautiful, facing the
Mhm.
Caribbean Sea. And in those areas on that ground, people don't understand why they keep seeing spirits in that space on Strand Street in Frederickstead and Freedom. We call it Freedom City.
Mm.
Over 800 bodies are underneath that asphalt. We haven't
Right.
covered that properly. So that's another area of what took place that when you ask like what kind of led up to this transfer and this purchase, because the Danes weren't ready to continue to contend with this kind of ongoing uprising and rebellion and fire. So they did up some very extreme things, took those women to prison from the tropics into Denmark, the frigid cold of Denmark,
Mm.
for many years. They gave them, some of them were given life sentences, but back then a life sentence was when they felt that your life was coming to closure, and then they would send them back. And by the time
Okay.
they sent many of these women back, they missed their families, their children, their husbands, their loved ones. It was a lot that was done very traumatically. Let me
Right.
fast forward to 1892 now,
Mhm.
because what happened in St. Thomas was very different. In
Right.
terms of, there were still labor uprisings, and they called it the coal laborers strike. It was a protest that happened on September 12th, 1892. One day, them brothers and sisters said they want fair wages for their work. No, none of the steamships could go anywhere because nobody was moving any coal anywhere. They just
Right.
shut the entire economy down one day. And
Mm.
they started to, and they said, we're not going to do the fire version of the St. Croix because we saw where that went, right? But we're
Yeah.
going to do fair wages. We're gonna do bamboo in the street. We're going to
Right.
wave our lights, but we ain't carrying one pitch of
Mm.
coal anywhere. Nobody. That's the kind of unity that people tend to overlook. And they were able to get fair wages for their work.
Right.
They were trying to pay people with the useless Mexican silver, knowing that the Mexican silver riots were happening. And they were
Okay.
giving that currency instead of using. See, that's the kind of, that's why I know that that's intentional dismantling
Yes. Yeah.
of what was happening with people just trying to make a living, right? And so from the
Yeah.
1890s, moving towards 1916, there were negotiations where the US government kept giving offers to the Danish government. You know, we will free you of that problem that you're having in the Danish West Indies. And strategically we need to have that land because
Okay.
we need to
Okay.
strategically be able to keep, the Germans from doing this, the French from
Right.
doing that, the British from doing this, not knowing the long term. And so
Mm,
that was some of the grounding for what took
mm,
place. And again, I'm giving a version from a more revolutionary space because other people, it was because they really were willing to give the hospitality back to the people in in America, and we wanted to have place. I mean, just saying, there's that version. It's a very romantic
yes.
tree version, but I'm just
Yeah.
giving it to you because you're right. When the lands were purchased and
Yes.
negotiated at one point, America didn't give Denmark a choice. They said, "You're either going to sell it to us, or
Right.
we're going to take it from you."
Right. Right.
See,
Right.
that's the part that people. So they might act nice and friendly in public now, but in
Mm-hmm.
the 1800s, coming into the early 1900s, at one point they didn't give the Danish, the Kingdom of Denmark, a choice. It was, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to take this, we're going to do this. You can keep some of the, certain trade laws you might have certain uh, control with. If
Mm,
you choose to come to the area and have access to the lands that you own, and a certain, there's still Danish quote
mm-hmm.
descendants here
Yes.
in 2025 that still have major holdings of land and a
Mm-hmm.
resource in
Mm-hmm.
20, but they're nice people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm.
So there's like a lot of history. I mean, one of the books that I encourage people, you can look at Umbilical Cord, but that's a history book that we use for students. But there's
Mm.
also, the history of the United States, of the Virgin Islands of the United States by
Right.
Dr. Isaac Ducan. That's another piece. And
Yeah.
again, there's some things that, because it does what you have asked of me,
Yes.
what was the role of the indigenous people? What
Yes.
led
Yes.
to the economic drivers? What was
Yes.
happening? Enslavement? What took
Yeah.
place with colonization? But then
Yeah.
the one that I tend to feel that is important because it gives a very 48 contiguous US version of what happened here is called
Mm-hmm.
The Rape of the American Virgins.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
By
Mm.
Edward A. O'Neill. And he spends a significant amount of time showing what transpired because
Mm.
you're calling it the Virgin Islands, but you're raping them,
Mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm,
Politically,
mhm.
economically, socially, spiritually, to the best of your effect, to your effect.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole other conversation if we start to speak about the religious infusion that dismantled some of the very core of the culture and heritage of this space called the Virgin Islands.
Mom, I want to thank you for these beautiful answers that you're giving, and I want people to appreciate the value of what it is that you're doing at the moment. Brothers and sisters, for those who are just joining us, we're speaking to Queen Mama ChenziRa Kahina, and I love to say your name, Mama, because your first name is my son's second name. So,
Oh,
yeah, so, I love
lovely,
to say your name.
lovely, lovely, lovely.
You know what I mean? But the Virgin Islands, brothers and sisters, yeah, an archipelago of islands in the Eastern Caribbean, yeah, strategically placed. So, like, if you're looking at it on a map, you come to the Virgin, what is called the Virgin Islands, are among the first set of islands that you come to, from the coming across the Atlantic Ocean into the Caribbean, brothers and sisters. Yeah, and so it's strategically placed in that regard for American military interests, but we'll come back to that in a second. At the same time, it's often overlooked, and the fact that this has the status of being a U.S. territory is a factor that is overlooked, and it's like Mama is gone through the history of the Virgin Islands as it relates to our people just now, but particularly as it relates to our resistance history. And I want to highlight the variety and the multi-layered and multidimensional nature of what Mama has just shared. We often look at well, first of all, we often know very little about our resistance to enslavement and colonialism as Africans from the Caribbean. And if we know, then we might just know one or two rebellion will take place on the island from which we hail. We often don't know about the broader breadth, yeah, and the relationship that we have with other Africans and other Taino and other indigenous groups of people who were revolting in the various different islands of the Caribbean. And then sometimes our revolt history can be one dimensional. So we rose up, we burned down some cane and some plantation and killed
Mhm.
some Martha and then moved on. Often we don't get the proper economic and political implications, yes, of what we were engaged in, and the fact that the consequences and what we were pursuing politically and economically was actually very conscious in a lot of instances. And so Mama has just given us, a beautiful rundown, and she's also presented some books for you all to research and get into if you want to take your research further. So thank you for that, Mama. I want to get into that. What this status of the um, Virgin Islands of the US, as you've informed us, actually means in practical terms. Yeah. So what does that mean in terms of the Virgin Islands relationship to the USA? And I guess most people would be aware of Puerto Rico as a US territory outside. So how similar is that relationship to the relationship of Puerto Rico to the United States of America?
Well, Puerto Rico is a commonwealth. So as a commonwealth, they have a constitution in place.
Right.
Whether it's the best for the people of Puerto Rico, that's for them to. They're still addressing
Yes.
that themselves.
Yes.
There are certain freedoms. Again, there are 3 million. Their population is 3 million
Hmm.
and change. So there's a little more exchange and engagement. There are
Right.
bases there that
Hmm.
are connected to the U.S. government. However, they too do not vote for the president of the U.S. So when people see us as U.S. anything, just
Hmm.
know we're not responsible. I'm gonna leave
Right.
that one right there, right? Because we don't get to vote in those types of things. We have
Yeah.
representation in the U.S. Congress, yes, but they too cannot vote in on the floor. They have to
Okay.
do their lobbying through other persons. However, when it comes to selective registration or the military draft,
Right.
18 to 35-year-olds are required to do so, right? And we have a large population in Puerto Rico, as well as here in the Virgin Islands, as well as in Guam, as well
Hmm.
as in the Mariana Islands, and as well as in Samoa, of
Hmm.
persons that are outside of the 48 contiguous U.S. in these territories or commonwealth spaces, and they're very engaged, very committed, very loyal to the US
Mm.
military, right? There's also the piece of taxation. So while some areas, like in the Virgin Islands, we may not have a state tax, but then we're not a state, right? We're a
Okay.
non-incorporated, make sure I say this clearly, a non-incorporated, non-self-governing
Mm.
territory of the
Mm.
United States. So I need
Mm.
people to simmer on that. So
Mm.
the short version, we're a colony, right, in 2025. But for the purposes of the nice utilization of English and the wordsmithing, if you look
Yeah.
up anything about the Virgin Islands of the United States, it's going to say it's a non-incorporated, non-self-governing territory of the United
Mm.
States of America. And it
Hmm.
sounds like an eloquent, balanced kind of relationship, but there's been attempts, not recently, it's been well over 25 years since there's been a address to have an action where we can address our federal status, because from the 1950s, 1953, 54 to be exact, the
Hmm.
United Nations brought out an entire initiative with that initial international decade for the elimination of racial discrimination in these international como declarations for the elimination of colonization. So
Right.
there were many countries, states, commonwealths, territories that were listed, and the Virgin Islands of the United States was one of them. And despite the directive that at
Hmm.
that time was agreed upon, even including the U.S. representation in those years, up to the 60s, the intention was for there to be either a statehood to be completely
Hmm.
absorbed into the United States government as a
Yes.
state.
Hmm.
But again, keep in mind our population rarely exceeds 120,000. We're currently at 90,000, yeah?
Oh
Of
wow.
all 4 islands, right? We're small, but
Wow.
tolerable,
Yeah.
right? But I think it's important to know the influence that these islands have to the economy,
Hmm.
even of the U.S., right? But there
Right.
was
Go
an
ahead.
option for statehood or independence or free
Hmm.
association. It was only these three.
Right.
Only these three. And this is going back to the 50s. So here
Mhm.
we are, a good 70 plus years later,
Mhm.
right? And we're still have not addressed our federal relationship with the United States. So it stays like in a status quo as a non incorporated, non self governing territory of the United States. Now,
Okay.
mind you, in the early parts, and I want to share something that gives some context so people know what was thought of us more than 100 years ago, right? And I'm reading a quotation from a naval governor who served as governor of what was then the Virgin Islands of the United States, because from 1917 until well into, wow, the 1930s, 40s, there were
Mhm.
naval governors that were appointed to serve as the leaders of the then Virgin Islands of the US.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then it shifted to, quote, appointed representatives through what became the Department of the Interior. We did not have our first elected governor of these Virgin Islands. In that
Mhm.
case, the first was Melvin Evans, the second, Cyril King, and I could go on with that
Mhm.
until the 70s.
Mm.
So I just need persons, and again, we give thanks for the civil rights, Black
Mm.
Power movements that gave agitation.
Mm.
Things kind of shift a bit here.
Mm.
America was
Mhm.
always thinking that there was going to be a shift that happened in the 48 contiguous, forgetting that what
Right.
was happening in the world, in the Caribbean,
Yes.
Eurasia, in Africa, throughout the Caribbean and South America, all of
Yes.
that had a lot to do with at least we were able to move in a space of some degree of
Mhm.
mini self governance,
Mm.
again, under the permissions, the sight, the oversight, the sovereign oversight of the United States of America. But I want to read what was stated in 1922 by
Mhm.
the then naval governor Sumner Eli Wetmore Cattell. Very important name to keep in your background. And
Yeah.
this was during the time of the new. This was less than, let's say, yeah, about 5 years coming out of the transfer and purchase. And I quote, Virgin Islanders, a quiet and humble people, should not be allowed to rule themselves for 100 years. And
Mhm.
when so, should be done under white rule, for
Hmm.
there are militants among them. Unquote. Now, I pull on that one because that kind of conceptual, I need people to get the conceptualization of
Mhm.
how these persons back in the 1920s
Mm.
saw, quote, militancy, saw the power of African ancestral people grounded in this space. I just need for people to get that, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, it looks small, but the US Navy was
Mhm.
concerned on who had rulership and authority and moved in a sovereign space in these
Mm.
places. And I'm sharing this, and the website I will place in the chat as well is
Mhm.
from a people's historical journey to self-determination. I will repeat this. A
Yes.
people's historical journey to
Mhm.
self-determination. So all of these things that I'm speaking to, the historiography, the concepts of, the treaties, the resolutions, the various articles, the publications. If you want to see all five proposed constitutions for the Virgin Islands, this site has them for you to
Mhm.
review, and it's free, right?
Right.
If you want to see the correspondence between Taino, those that are speaking Arawakan, Quisqueya, Kalinago, there's letters and correspondences here. You want to see about the reparation conversations and chat, because here in the Virgin Islands, as quiet as it's kept, and again, love my brethren and sistren with the CARICOM Reparations
Mhm.
Commission and all of
Mhm.
the brethren and sistren globally that deal with reparation movements.
Mhm.
Respect for NCOBRA and all the other organizations, Pan African, fundamental African organizations that deal with reparations. I just
Mhm.
want to highlight that the Virgin Islands government, specifically through non governmental organizations partnering with legislature, were one of the earliest
Right.
entities that created a legal policy
Right.
around making Denmark in this case, but we had a long list. It was Denmark in one iteration, in regard to dealing with reparations and
Yes, yes,
specifying the crime, listing and
yeah.
documenting the crimes against humanity that were done to African people, African and indigenous people. We'll highlight that in these spaces. And we were
Mhm,
specific of what Denmark did, what France did, what British did, we went very, very clear. Spanish, all of them, Portugal. People don't like to talk about Portugal. And everybody
mhm,
think Portugal because they're so small, that they didn't do anything. No, we
mhm,
make sure we highlight what took place that allowed for this from
right.
even the Vatican and the papal bulls that
Mhm,
facilitated that in the
mhm,
1400s and the 1500s moving forward. So
mhm,
I encourage persons to look at this APHJ, the number two,
mm,
SD.com website, because then a lot of the things that I'm speaking to, you can
mhm,
get historiography. That conversation on status and decolonization is long. You're still in
mm,
that space. You say
mm,
decolonization, people are like, but we like how the status is. What would happen if America left? Oh my goodness, we would have to swim with sharks. We won't be able to feed ourselves. What will happen if the boat doesn't come? And then we remember what happens when we have a hurricane and
right.
nothing can come here.
You're
And we have
right.
to feed ourselves and take
Right.
care of each other. Right. So
Right.
we're very resilient, but at the
Yeah.
same time, there's a lot of there's a lot of camaraderie within the Caribbean space because some
Mhm,
persons lend themselves only to America. And
right.
sometimes that's why people may overlook when you, like you said, when you at festival or carnival and everybody's saying
Mhm,
all the names. Me, I bring the biggest flag possible. So they have to, and I make sure they get their lines.
yeah.
Virgin Island. And then
Yes, yes, yes,
US on the side. But
yes,
Virgin Island first.
yes.
So we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, mama. I look forward to seeing how this develops in terms of this self determination.
Yes.
Regarding the Virgin Islands. But I know time is limited, so I could get stuck on a lot of these issues and really go in. But let's move on. Yeah. Um. Somewhat because okay. In fact, before we move on slightly, let me just clarify this. So you have what is called a governor. Yeah. So
Yes, we
technically
do.
speaking, yeah. So I've heard it variously referred to as a governor. I've heard it or a premier,
We don't
or a
have
chief
premiers here.
minister.
Yeah, we don't.
Okay. Okay.
We have a governor. We have
Right.
a form of governance that we will have a governor. We have a lieutenant governor. We also have a legislative body that
Right.
currently has the election of 15 representatives,
Okay.
7 for St. Croix, 7
Yes.
for St. Thomas, and one
Right.
is at large from St. John. So a total
Okay.
of 15. And
Okay.
then, of course, we have our judicial branches of government from Superior Court all the way to District Court. That the District Court piece is federal. And then there
Okay.
is a Supreme Court of the Virgin Islands. Yes.
All right. Your current governor, by the way, is also known to us over here. He was studying over here
Of
about
course.
20 years ago. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah.
Right.
So yeah, we'll leave that there just in case. But you know what I mean. We'll talk offline. We'll talk offline. We want to know what going on.
Well, I
But
mean, right now, what I would like to make sure that persons also know, I was mentioning that you can see the first 5 drafts of the Virgin Islands constitutions, some that didn't make it past the people of the Virgin Islands, some that didn't make it past the governor, one particular governor of the Virgin Islands, and some that did not meet the criteria that has to be approved by U.S. Congress.
okay.
Currently, as of this month, we have a sixth Constitution Convention with new set
Okay.
of delegates, some from previous conventions, but several that are new. And I want to highlight that several that are young, that
Yes.
are bringing a very fresh layer of expertise to the process. So the intention is that this sixth one will be the one where we can establish a constitution. Although there are many that would have
Okay.
preferred, it just seems like the cart came before the horse because
Mm,
again, if you're following the protocol of a nation that doesn't necessarily want you to have autonomy, freedom, or sovereignty, then of course they're going to tell you do this first when you really should do that first. But it's
mm,
okay because
mm,
we're the type of people that know how to bring this into
right.
fruition and make it work for us. So
Okay.
the intention is to complete a constitution and
Okay.
within the body of the constitution address the federal status and the
Okay.
federal relationship that we have with the United States. Because one of the things that has been limiting is many times, although we're geographically in the Caribbean and
Mm-hmm.
more than 75% of our population have ties
Mm-hmm.
to CARICOM nations, we do
Mm.
not have formal observers status or even associate membership in CARICOM. So it's
Okay.
through, right, so it's through non-governmental organizations that we engage
Organizations.
in CARICOM,
Yeah.
or as I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned to you, through the efforts and work that persons like myself and others
Mm-hmm.
are involved in, we're able to sit in organizations that have membership in CARICOM or
Yes. Yeah.
CARICOM entities. And that's how we're able to bring this fruition and these types of relationships in the work and the building of our autonomous governments to the
Right.
forefront, right, to the best of our ability, because that's ultimately what we're moving in the direction towards, to be able
Okay.
to have more autonomy and more freeness. People talk about freedom and liberation and justice
Mm-hmm.
for all. And many times here in the Virgin Islands, unless we even speak out, people don't.
Mm.
Then most of the time you say the Virgin Islands, people only remember St. Thomas,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that is the shipping and trading in more busy, more urban space. But St.
Yes.
Croix, and I'm going to say it, St. Croix is the cultural capital of the entire Virgin Islands. I
Oh yeah.
say it without apology, don't blink.
Yes.
The
Yes.
entire Virgin Islands, the cultural capital is right here in
Well,
IIC.
I think anybody who listens to reggae music deeply will know that.
Right. When I listened to your opening, I said, okay, we're bringing like the school midnight Quebec. I said, okay, I
When
hear
they are, listen, we have to have a conversation about that, yeah,
for
at some
sure,
point,
for sure.
because especially among Africans who deal with the Sematawi African yoga systems, right?
Yes,
Rastafari in general, and so anybody who's very spiritually inclined, especially that has ancestry from the Caribbean, yeah.
yes.
When we get into that energy, you see midnight, yeah. You see Desiree, yeah.
Yeah,
You see Rima, yeah. It's
yeah,
levels, right? There's level, and so but then you realize that they want to come from the same place. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? So there's definitely something about Saint Croix that
Mm.
brings about that such a unique manifestation, because it's a recognizably unique expression of reggae music, yeah, that has
Yes, yes.
developed out of Saint Croix. So I don't want we'll come to it another time. I just want to say it's, you know what I mean, it's serious
I'm
business,
giving thanks. No, but I'm
you know what
giving
I'm saying?
thanks for just you
Yeah.
bringing that to the fruition, because it's through, again, through the arts as well as our sciences that we're able
Mhm.
to really speak of those layers and those reflections and the ways that our ancestors worked through us to be able
Mhm.
to do this particular type of work
Mhm.
and to be able to
Mhm.
bring truth to power in these
Mhm.
efforts. It's
Yeah.
the work as you have been so instrumental to as well within the
Mhm.
UNIA-ACL
Mhm.
RC
Mhm.
2020, that being able to link with Kimbunga Media and be a part of that. I shouldn't even just say link up, like to be integrated into that and to be
Mhm.
a nation builder. I'm still navigating all the different iterations you have for Kimbunga Media, but I
Yeah.
really love the idea because persons didn't know. A lot of persons in
Yeah.
this area, they just don't know. And while you
Yes.
have a very large following there,
Yes.
in
Yes.
the we're looking to be able to have persons, the same way that everybody wants to be on Facebook and Twitter,
Yes.
what they call now
Yes. Yes.
X and this and that and that. We need to be
Yeah.
pushing our own so that we can have platforms to be able to share these honest conversations on what
Yes.
exists, what took place. And again,
Yeah.
there's a number of persons that can come and engage in these types of conversations because there's other things, I'm speaking to just give some some clarity on how persons should begin to see the Virgin Islands and not just
Mhm.
as sand, sea, sun, and fun, which it can be that too. But
Right.
there's a very strong legacy building.
Yes.
Some of the we've just preserved, and it has taken almost 40 years to do so through
Mhm.
efforts of persons like my cousin Professor Olasi Davis,
Mhm.
who is a native Virgin Islander and
Mhm.
a professor here at the University of the Virgin Islands as well.
Mhm.
And he and others were instrumental to preserving more than 2,200 acres of maroon
Right.
sanctuary lands so that it
Mhm.
can't become a golf course. It won't become just a 500-room hotel. It won't just be, because there's there's burial grounds in this space. There's a cultural
Mhm.
history and historic preservation legacy in this space. This is part of what made St. Croix earned the designation of becoming a national heritage area, not a park, but a
mm.
national heritage area, not just the maroon sanctuary lands, but the entire 84 square miles because of the different layers of our cultural nuances, the traditions, the history, not just the colonizing enslavement history. That's like a thread, but
Mm,
the craftsmanship, the type
mm,
of architectural and
mm,
building crafts that were established here, right? The types of spiritual ancestral veneration traditions. People don't like
mm,
to talk about that day, right? But that's like
mm,
a whole other portion. So even if people were Moravian or Catholic or Anglican and all the
mm,
other iterations of religiosity,
mm,
Western religiosity in the day, and
mhm,
sometimes in the night too, they knew those
mm,
traditions that came
mhm.
from our ancestral sacred,
Yes.
sacred practices, right? They knew about agriculture and herbology and
Yeah. Yeah.
healing. You know, women knew what to do so they weren't screaming in intolerable pain when they
Right.
were giving birth. Birth
Mhm.
wasn't a sickness or
Yeah.
a disease,
Yes.
it was a
Yeah.
natural occurrence, right? It's only in these, in certain iterations in very westernized society that it becomes an illness and we have to be
Mm,
hospitalized, rephrase, and they have to be hospitalized because mine were born naturally and usually at home, right? Just iteration, right? Including my twins. So
yes.
I'm very clear on, like how all of this is tied to the richness of this space. We have brothers and sisters that have been sharing some of these oral
Mhm.
traditions and offering stories and not just folklore, but griot, people that can speak of their great grandparent coming from Senegal or
Right.
Ghana and who went where and what plantation and who they walked for and how many
Mm,
children and where were they baptized and people have been working on that through a lens of a very oral tradition, not
mhm.
only what is archived in the narratives of a Danish enslaver trying to
Mhm.
excuse the wanton rape and
Mhm.
disregard of life for African people. Is that coming across kind of?
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. Yes,
Mhm.
Mama, thank you so much. We're speaking to Mama ChenziRa Kahina, brothers and sisters. Yeah, a cultural custodian of our people in the Virgin Islands of the USA, currently designated. And as she just said, St. Croix is the cultural capital of the Virgin Islands, brothers and sisters. I want to ask one more question on this, and we'll
Of
touch on
course.
some reparations matters. How
Okay.
how let me know when you got 10 minutes, yeah, left,
Of
so
course,
I
I
can.
shall. I shall.
Yeah, all right,
My
all right,
students know to sit right over there. They're good. They're
okay,
fine.
all right, cool, cool, cool. Good thanks, good thanks. Yeah. So what am I saying now? So yeah, you spoke about the influx of Europeans, Eurasians into the Virgin Islands, and the economic realities, yeah, that are incurred as a result of that, in terms of the fact that basically it seems like it's a bit of a playground for the rich and wealthy, yeah,
Mhm.
of the United States of America. A comparison where that is concerned that might be more popular is the Bahamas as far as the Americas is concerned.
Mhm.
So just speak on that a little bit, just in terms of the economic relationship between the Virgin Islands and America. Is it a playground for the rich and wealthy? Is it a tax haven, for American corporations? How does it work?
And ultimately, all of what you're saying is a fusion of many things like that.
Right,
So
right,
there are the rich and wealthy and famous and all of that,
right.
high profile of various celebrities that are able to protect their interests here.
Right.
We
Hmm.
do have an economic development commission and an authority that provides programs that minimize certain businesses that are grounded here, based here, as long as
Hmm.
they have a certain, it's about 180-day residence. You need to have property here, you need to have a business here, you need to employ people from here. But again, that's where that question of from here, people like to use that term local versus foreign, and we like to say homegrown or native. And
Hmm.
people get a little bit, can't say native because this is an American territory and everybody's American. But that's not the
Mm.
case when it comes to the Virgin Islands authentically, which
Yes,
is
yes,
why
yes.
people need to be very clear on what that means. So, yes, you do
Mm.
have persons that come here to be protected from other tax issues in other
Mm,
parts of the world. And you do have persons that come here and they exploit that or they speculate.
right.
And then you
Right.
have some that actually integrate themselves respectfully and positively into the community here in the Virgin Islands. And not to
Okay.
say that that's the majority, because
Hmm.
just the nature of capitalism and imperialism, that's not the
Hmm.
majority. But there
Hmm.
are some that come with a more communal, more socialist, don't be
Hmm.
mad at the word, just a more balanced
Yes.
engagement. So they're giving,
Hmm.
they're benefiting from generating income here, but they're
Yeah.
also offering reciprocity to make sure that there's a balance in terms of their investment, their
Right.
presence. There's people that just love when they come here. The Virgin Islands has a way of calling you and
Mm,
embracing you. And then
mm,
when you start to come with too much of a capitalist, imperialist, colonizing construct, it
right.
has a way of spitting you back in the sea. I
Mm,
just tell people that obviously we haven't spit all the entities that need to be spit in the sea, but I'm just saying it has a way, if you do not come with the intentionality of
mm-hmm,
balancing and incorporating yourself into what you meet here. Like some people want to come here and bring whatever they from here. That's not a wise choice. The island's too small. I just tell people up front, you need to be able to come and integrate and percolate well
yes.
and balance and blend. Think of it like a calalupat, We're
Hmm.
bringing all the different greens and maybe a little extra, some extra seasoning, but you don't
Hmm.
want to come and like just throw something that
Right.
don't belong in the pot or part of the recipe. There's also a an issue happening currently where a lot of persons, just in their escape mode from the 48 contiguous, they're able to come here freely. So
Right.
they're to come here with their economic wealth and they
Mm,
can replace. So there's been a repeopling of what we refer to as natives or homegrown Virgin Islanders. So many persons may talk with a little extra twang. You might think that they've been here and they say, well, I'm a local. And they've been here
mm,
like, 18 months, sometimes 6 months. And the next thing you know, they're voting in our elections and so forth. Because
mm.
those are the types of things we haven't properly worked out in the interest of being somewhat like the American Virgin Islands, the US. That's when I say US Virgin Islands, because we move in like we're American, like an American state that's not
Yeah.
right.
Right.
So there is that issue that you
Hmm.
referenced in that regard, and we're working collectively through that. So that's why the Constitution becomes important. There's
Okay.
been conversations on decolonization and efforts moving in that direction. The U.S. Civil Rights Commission has an actual body that
Okay.
includes legal counsel from the Virgin Islands to be included in these revisions in the Civil Rights Commission, considering that some of these things were in place up until January 20th this year. We're
Hmm.
not sure how that's going to move forward
Okay.
right now. Yes.
Okay. Give thanks for that, Mama. So you touched on the fact that the Virgin Islands are not officially a member state of CARICOM, although culturally
Yeah.
the Virgin Islands is the Caribbean. Yeah.
Yes.
What in just let's touch on that a little bit deeper. And in the outside of CARICOM, the formal entity, what is the relationship with the Virgin Islands with the other islands in the Caribbean?
Like I said, we have more than 70% of our
Mm-hmm.
population of our African ascended people. They
Mm-hmm.
come from the CARICOM nations.
That's right.
Period. I mean, many of us are from, like whether it's whether it's true, St. Kitts, Nevis, Trinidad, Tobago,
Mm-hmm.
Antigua, Barbuda,
Mm-hmm.
Anguilla,
Mm-hmm.
Dominica,
Mm-hmm.
de la otra, Guadeloupe. Even though Guadeloupe has a different relationship and is still, but I mean, Martinique has just come into CARICOM.
Mm-hmm.
Guyana, we have brothers and sisters that have ties, right here. We have every kind of friendship association to the Caribbean
Right.
here in the
Mm-hmm.
Virgin Islands,
Right.
right? Large population of brothers and sisters from Haiti, some
Mm-hmm.
that came again for work and are clear, they're not
Mm-hmm.
undocumented. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
some that had to flee, run away from genocide and chaos. And we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be a country supposedly to
Mm-hmm.
welcome them. So there's been efforts. I'm not sure what the status is on that yet. That's something that has to be addressed by our representative to U.S. Congress,
Mm-hmm.
along with our governor. And
Mm-hmm.
the executive branch and certain legislative policies, but the intention has been to keep this relationship going. So we do a lot of things through education, various research, economic development, environmental
Mhm.
awareness. Because when the hurricane hit, it doesn't discriminate in the Caribbean. All the 48 contiguous now, right? See, before it used to just happen down here, and everybody was like, "Oh, we really feel sorry for you. Maybe FEMA will help you." No, that
Mm,
doesn't work like that. So we had to start doing our own emergency management systems
mm,
amongst ourselves. So there's like a ongoing connectivity in that regard. And of course, our relationship with the British Virgin Islands, because we refer to ourselves as the United Virgin Islands.
right,
Like,
right,
other people call it whatever, whatever, but we
right,
just say United Virgin Islands because
right.
I have relatives that got ties in Tortola and Anegada and Jules Van Dyke and Virgin Gorda. And this
Mm,
just spreads across the region, all the way
mm.
south. Like I said, Guyana. Then don't get us started on Central America, the Caribbean side, right?
Yeah,
Like my brethren
yeah.
and sisters in Belize and Honduras, even in Guatemala, whether they like to believe it or not, right? In El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama,
Yes.
Costa Rica, we have ties because of
Mm,
the connection in this space called the Caribbean Sea. So, San Andreas, Santa Catalina, right? There's
mhm,
like, it's not, there's ties to people in Colombia, Venezuela. So this whole Caribbean basin, from
mhm,
the south, from people like to talk about, oh, why are all these people in the Caribbean in Houston and Texas, well, Texas in general, Houston in particular, as well as Alabama, Georgia,
mhm.
Louisiana, and Florida. I don't know why they even claim that one, but Florida is more people from this region than
Yes,
probably Floridians, yeah? And
right.
so, and they're and tied to indigenous people. And then we start going up the Gullah Geechee corridor. So you see how we spread out. Like that's
Mhm,
just how African indigenous people move because
mhm, mhm.
we've been moving and we continue to move. They want to call it migration. What's the pretty term now? Forced migration. What's the nice pretty term for enslavement? Human trafficking. Whatever
Yes,
they
yes,
call
yes,
it,
yes,
these
yes.
things, we know them from millennia ago. This isn't new for us. And that's what
Mhm,
comes some of these distractions that are manifesting. It's a great time for us to shift how we engage in these situations and how we begin to utilize our governments, our non governmental organizations, our educational institutions, and definitely our economic development institutions. We're not going to be worrying about the money that they claiming to promise for us. We have to go take our own, generate our own.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, Mama. All right. So, and we're gonna have to come back to this subject more fully on another occasion. But
Okay.
looking quickly at the issue of reparations and CARICOM, as we've identified, you have a relationship with one of our leading reparations activists from the UK, Sister Esther Stanford, and so you are aware that we've had some significant critiques of the
Absolutely.
CARICOM of
She
the
makes them
CARICOM.
very clear that you know what I
Yes.
love about my sister? I want to make sure I say this in front of everybody. I
Yes.
love and honor and respect the African Queen Mother Warriors that
Yes.
are comfortable speaking our truth,
Yes.
breaking, and if we wrong, we're gonna correct it, and if we
Mhm.
right, we're gonna just hold
100%.
strength, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
it again, I because of where I sit, I'm very
Mhm.
cautious of
Yes.
some of the things, and I say cautious in the terms of keeping it in my art, so that truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony reigns in what I'm speaking. And if
Yes.
I don't know, then I listen so that I
No,
can
absolutely.
learn and be able
Mhm,
to engage. And what are the ways, not so much because compromising can jack up principles. So I'm not going to use that term, but how do
mhm.
we meet a balance and a
Yes, yes,
harmony
yes.
of getting the work done, making sure that if we're speaking of reparations and we're speaking of repairing the damages done to us, then we have to
Mhm.
stop being in a mode of damaging ourselves.
Right, right,
That
right.
was something that I had to really go like,
Mm,
so the
mm,
critique, and I
mm, mm.
appreciate that you were clear because some people say it's just criticism and it's just hostile. No,
Yes.
when
Mhm,
you see some people doing things that if you see me going to the edge of a 10,000-foot cliff,
mhm,
I
mhm,
pray that
mhm.
Queen Mother, Come, no, come, no, just stop. I pray that's what you will do. And that's what
Absolutely.
I gathered from what Sister Doctor shared
Hmm.
with us,
Hmm.
as well as Queen Mother Esther Hookside, because she provided that legal mindset of
Yes.
what were some of the other elements that
Yes.
happened there. And I know that there's some people, they don't want to deal with CARICOM, and they don't
Yes.
want to deal with the African Union, and they don't
Yeah.
want to do it. And I said, I hear you. So
Yes.
then no. All I'm saying is that that's an avenue. While we struggling to speak to the 100 of us, I'd
Yes.
like for us to speak to the million of us or the
Absolutely.
billion of us. And if we
Absolutely.
need to use their platform, even if
Yes.
we go on just bonfire, then
Yes. Yes.
there's a way to bonfire. And half the
Yes.
time people will agree and clap with you.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
again, we have to work more diligently and
Hmm.
more respectfully on a strategy that I tend to use, which is called the ghost,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Gentle, honest,
Hmm.
open, specific talk.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Actual framework for how we engage. Some people use it for negotiation, conflict
Yes.
resolution,
Hmm.
anger management, etc. But inside of our house, we have to
Hmm.
use those types of strategies because they're
Yes.
grounded in what? They're grounded in Ubuntu. They're
Yes. Yes.
grounded in
Yes.
Ma'at and all
Hmm.
the other terms that we use for how in African sacred traditional spaces, that's
Hmm.
how we used to be able to engage and pull from our ancestral veneration
Hmm.
traditions to then be able to have these conversations. So we're not just sitting there screaming and
No,
hollering
absolutely.
for a couple of hours, you know.
A-
So before I forget,
Absolutely. On.
so the people that
Well.
may not agree,
Hmm.
I again, I'm always encouraging share the if it's not a 10-point plan, it's a
Mm,
12-point plan or a
mm,
7 point because maybe plan isn't the right word. Maybe we
mm,
need to start looking at all of these reparations manifesto documents that have
mm,
existed from like the 70s and even earlier. We
mm.
just think that we're doing it now because
Yeah.
it's now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's things that were happening like in the 20th century
Mm,
regarding repairing the damages done
hmm.
and what would that look like monetarily? What would
Yes.
that
Yes.
look like in terms of resource? What would
Mm-hmm.
that look like in terms of the return of
Hmm.
our ancestral belongings and
Hmm.
land?
Hmm.
And what would that look like in terms of our being exempt, even if we're in spaces like the United States of America or in the UK or
Hmm.
in any other part of the world? What kind of exemptions would we have from
Yeah.
taxation to the same governments that
Yeah.
are wealthy from raping and
Yeah.
pillaging and
Yeah.
stealing and thief? Did I say that correctly?
Hmm.
From our African ancestors. So I tell persons, look at the CARICOM reparations.org site
Yeah.
just so that you have an idea of
Oh,
at least what is intended or
yes.
what's
Yes. Yes.
happening. And then when you get ready to critique it alongside of what and I always tell persons, bring the critique
Yeah.
so that because we need to improve.
100%. No,
We
Mama, you know what it is? I think that there's levels to the critiques, right? So there are a lot of activists who are in the or working with CARICOM that people generally respect. Yeah. I think in general, people often have issues with the governments in question, right? You know what I'm saying? That's and the neocolonial nature of those governments, and then there are others who don't really have much problems with the 10-point plan or those points, if that makes sense. They'll probably agree with most of what's on the website. But the how the governments have, well, there are some who believe, even in the region, yeah, that
Yes,
the government effectively took over the reparations agenda. So there's levels to the critiques, yeah. But
exactly.
but there's
And
there's some there's some, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are some recent developments and or conversations that are taking place that I haven't tuned into, yeah,
yes,
in the last couple weeks or last weeks or last couple months, right?
yes.
So I wonder if you could inform the audience about what those are. What is the significance of those discussions, developments, etc.
Okay, so because the time is limited and I'm within that 10-minute space, I, I
Yes, yes,
I would love to have an opportunity to make this
to
as
come back.
concise
Yep,
as possible and to
yep,
return to give
yep,
some detail because I'll be in a better position to have a public document that I
yep.
can share with you before we speak so we can just speak to that.
Discuss it. Yes,
There are several things that have happened. The
yeah.
United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent has made this reparation initiative movement one of their central elements of engagement. So that by virtue of them having their inaugural regional gathering in Barbados in December, the first week of December of 2024, that there's outcomes of that are being prepared from their rapporteur.
Right.
And then we've also have what I call the grassroots in the room report. So
Okay.
those are the things that we're looking to be able to share,
Okay.
hopefully on or before the 15th of this month of February,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Especially since there's a lot of, this is African Black History Month, which we know is 365. But here in this part of on this side of the Atlantic, this is something that people are celebrating. So they're bringing up lists of activities around this reparations revision. This 10-point
Okay.
plan has been revised, and not only revised, but updated to incorporate those indigenous elements, the issues of women, African women, and gender affairs, to incorporate the economic component, and the fact that there was that position, that belief that there wasn't proper inclusivity. And again, I say, to as many respects, there wasn't, right? Because there were certain, people that are already having like a CARICOM led reparations commission in their respective CARICOM country. Of course, they're going to be the ones that are central to a lot of these gatherings and input. And then it became others that have been granted or have earned through their works representation, whether it's St. Martin,
Okay.
Air, the Virgin Islands, and
Mm.
others, right? That Martinique, well, they just
Mm.
became part of CARICOM,
Mhm.
Guadeloupe, etc.
Mhm.
And then there's entities like the Caribbean Pan-African Network that,
Right.
because we have representation throughout the Caribbean,
Mhm.
from the south of the 48 contiguous all the way to Suriname,
Mhm.
there's another layer of input that's been included. So
Okay.
I know that from that, we will be able to offer something, because that's literally being percolated like right and
Right
worked
now.
on and finalized as we speak. It's not
Okay.
an easy thing to do. I think it's important to know the gathering in Cuba, also in December, for the Afro Descendants Initiative, again through the United Nations,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That brought another layer of
Mhm.
declarations and statements that brought certain things together. There were several declarative statements that came out of the recent reconciliation and reunification of the Maroon
Mhm.
communities in
Mhm.
Jamaica. This was just early January. And that one we can speak to at great length, because some of that I was working as media, in
Mhm.
addition to being one of the facilitators and moderators for some of those convenings. And those are things that are coming through the voice of brothers and sisters that are Maroon sovereign state
Mhm.
spaces now, that are linked to this CARICOM, this reparatory justice piece, because the focus was on repairing the damages done
Mhm.
to African, indigenous, ancestral people. I want to make sure I highlight that.
Mhm.
So, and then of course the connection to that role of our ancestral recognition, veneration, and spiritual systems. That was something that people overlooked,
Yeah.
and you have to include that in order
100%.
to yeah, that has to be at the core, right, from
Absolutely.
beginning to end. So I hope that I've given a concise synopsis of that
No, no,
respect.
absolutely. We'll definitely come back to it, Mama. Thank you for your
Yeah,
time. You've
yeah,
blessed us this evening. Sometimes we can get caught up in dealing with whatever's
yeah,
the hot issue or in the news cycle. Every now and then we just got to take some time just to learn about our people
yeah,
in a part of the world.
right,
And you've really blessed us this evening,
yeah.
afternoon, depending on where you're there, the time zone.
No, but I definitely would be, it's not even so much remiss, but we definitely send our prayers of strength and
Hmm.
revolutionary fervor to our brothers and sisters in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And we're looking for the
Absolutely,
balance and the
absolutely,
harmony, so that the wanton loss of life can be reduced, decreased,
absolutely,
and completely decimated. And
absolutely,
we call on those ancestors like the Honorable Patrice Lumumba to be
absolutely.
able to just rise up and quell some of these things. And we encourage persons to look into, again, another site, the Friends of the Congo, because
Yes,
they're
sir.
the ones that have people on the ground
Yes,
and
sir.
people all over the globe that
Yes,
are
sir.
able to give more concrete
Yes, sir.
information and evidence in that regard. And of
Stay
course,
tuned. Stay tuned, brothers and sisters. We're gonna have a representative of Friends of the Congo on next week. Yeah, so just
Yeah,
stay
get
tuned.
back. I'm glad. Make sure that you keep saying, because I need to make sure that everybody. We need to really push that, because
No,
person needs to
100%.
hear. Yeah, they need to hear firsthand what is taking place, what the
Yes,
possibilities are, and what our roles are. So that
yes,
instead of
sir.
getting twisted on the distractions over some,
Yes,
right,
sir.
we have our own institutional rebuilding and
Absolutely,
internal reparations that we need to be working on,
absolutely.
right? So
Mama,
get.
before you go, I just want to let you know Baba Sengo is watching and he sends his greetings.
Oh, give
Um, and he also has informed me that
Ooh.
Baba Neely Fuller has passed
Oh,
away.
wow. Oh,
Yeah,
my.
so
Okay, may
we
he
wanted to.
rise in ancestral presence. Oh, that's a
Mhm.
powerful one. But he made it
Yes,
to 95, and we're
yes, we give that.
grateful. And
We give
anyone
that.
that doesn't know who Neely Fuller is, you
Yes.
want to read the compensation.
Hmm.
Because,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
that's a whole other conversation. Thank you for
Yes,
that,
Mama.
Baba Senghor.
Yes, Mama.
Thank you for
Yes,
that.
Mama.
We'll
Mama,
definitely
I'm gonna let you go because I know you got to run. But thank you
Mhm.
once again, and
Give
we look
thanks.
forward to having you on again at some
Well, I
point
look
soon.
forward, and before I go, I just would like to say Amasu and Panter, Sa Uksu Emerhran Panter, Aura Maketi Paherura. We give thanks and praise to the One Most High. We live each day daily for the One Most Divine, and we shall do it tomorrow just as we do it today.
Amen.
Much
All right.
more Yemen Hotel.
Amen. Tap, tap. Good facts, Mama. Take care. You know how to let yourself out, or should I let you out?
I'm good. I got you.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right, brothers and sisters, that was Mama ChenziRa. You know what I'm saying? You know what one thing I love about Mama ChenziRa, you know. She know all for you the technology. She never the technology. You know what I mean? She never the technology. All right, brothers and sisters. So yes indeed. You know, our mama has shared the words of power and honor for the spirit of our now ascending ancestor Baba Neely Fuller. Let us give thanks for his work and his service on behalf of our people, and do do the work that needs to be done to make the most of his service and his sacrifice. I share, I share. Before we go, brothers and sisters, do you want to remind ones and ones that coming up tomorrow, brothers and sisters, we will be speaking to Vava Tampa and Uncle Luezi Kinshasa. We stand with Congo. Yes, indeed, brothers and sisters. We're going to be delving deeper into what is happening in the Congo. I want to send a special shout out and a special thanks to our sister Francine Mukwaya, who joined us last week for our conversation on what is currently taking place in the Congo. We're going to be continuing, and as said, there'll be another conversation next week as well, brothers and sisters. We also next week have Elder Cecil Gutsmore returning to talk to us about African leaders and our unwise fixation with international institutions such as the United Nations. So do stay tuned for that. It is the year of the centenary of Omowale Malcolm X, Papa Patrice Lumumba, and Baba France Fanon, brothers and sisters. And so many events are taking place in relation to this, and we'll have continued content coming up out of Kimbunga Media in relation to these matters. Stay tuned to our social media for events that are taking place this month. For example, the Omwali Malcolm X observance on the 23rd of February. For more information, you can check our website, the website of the Al Kebalan Revivalist Movement. Just simply go to alkebulan.org. Yeah. And all information that you need will be there for you, brothers and sisters. So for those who actually need that website, I'm going to display it now, alkebalan.org. Our speakers for the event are going to be Mama Marimba Ani and Baba Mwalimu Baruti, brothers and sisters. You don't want to miss. And the subject is Message from the Ancestors to the warriors. Message from the ancestors to the warriors. Once again, alkebulan.org, or you can go to Kimbunga Media, sign up to our mailing list, and you'll get all information directly in your inbox, brothers and sisters. All right. So yeah, once again, tomorrow, 8 p.m., Vava Tampa and Uncle Luezi for We Stand with Congo will be going in. And yeah, next week we're going to be discussing the crimes of Paul Kagame. Yeah, so do stay tuned for all those things. With that, I say unto thee, Tendai Mwali, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe, Kudzai, Mudzimu Mukulu. We give praises unto our great ancestors, Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation for all African people. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
I am a bushman. 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 You need to understand. You from the African continent. Just how the Black Americans stand out. Truly is your brother, man. Had they dehumanized and taken your name? Had they fed you this wine and fed you shame? Yeah, yeah. Today you would be just the same. Stand out. As the people you disrespect and disdain, you have been brainwashed to call each other bushman. But I am a bushman. 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 440 years, you're telling you said as savages, our forefathers died, but the savagery of your now city streets today makes me wish to be back in the bush now. I say, you are worried about the state where you reside. What about the state of your mind? You are living in scenic places with good graces, while there is chaos among the races. But I am a bushman. 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 They paid special attention to my woman and to our little one. They said if she learns to eat from her down-dressers and her regeneration will be perpetuation. For she will teach our little one. Men forced to stud and move on along. Live so long without community, and then the damage of your false Christianity. But I am bushman. I am a 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 bushman. necessary. Truly, one company around. So they are selling you their dysfunctional psychological tendencies, schizophrenia. But I am a bushman. 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 Wake from my youth in the morning. You are being reprogrammed and reprogrammed. Watching tell light vision. Living in a system of peer corruption. They calling it civilization. What do they have in common? What do they have in common? This light vision in this civilization. Pure light, pure light, pure light. Absolutism based upon nothing. Yeah, but I am bushman. I am a bushman. I am a bushman. A bushman. I am a bushman. I am a bushman. I am a bushman. I am a bushman. I'm saying yeah. Oh 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 yeah. Yeah. Oh 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 yeah. Yeah. Oh 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 yeah. Julie. Julie. Math is their tool, philosophy is their tool, technology is their tool. Don't you know